Welcome to the third episode in an ongoing Legendarium series called The Dark Side of the Puritans. In this episode, we will talk about the Pequot War. The Pequot Tribe lived along the coast of present-day Long Island Sound for thousands of years before the arrival of Dutch and English settlers. The arrival of Europeans brought diseases that caused the deaths of many indigenous people living along the coasts. However, since the Pequot lived further inland, they remained relatively unaffected. Thus, it became easy for them to subjugate other tribes like the Niantic, Nipmuc, and Matabesic through diplomacy, force, intermarriage, and warfare. As part of their control, the Pequot forbade subject tribes from the European fur trade, so they could control it alone. In 1622, this led to a tragic incident in which the Pequot chief Tatobam offered a Dutch trader named Ellikens 700 feet of tightly strung, polished shells. Believing the Pequot mocked him, Ellikens murdered Tatobam and delivered his corpse back to the Pequot, who took revenge by burning Ellikens' trading post. The Dutch, fearing the loss of the rich fur trade, replaced Ellikens with Peter Barnsten, who spoke Algonquin. More importantly, he understood that the indigenous peoples highly prized those polished shells called wampum, and they became central to the fur trade. It is well-known history that the first Puritans arrived in North America during the year 1620 in modern-day Massachusetts. As the Puritans of Massachusetts Bay spread deeper into the continent, they competed with the Dutch over the fur trade. Additionally, some of the Pequot subject tribes, like the Narragansett, joined the fur trade to grow rich and snub their Pequot overlords. An already troubled situation grew worse in 1634 with the murder of Englishman John Stone and 7 of his men by the Niantic tribe. To keep the peace, the Pequot chief Sassacus sent the English a great quantity of wampum. This smoothed things over, in part because Stone himself was infamous as a pirate and slave trader. Early in 1636, another Englishman named John Oldham died mysteriously. Much like Stone, Oldham also had a reputation as a troublemaker and had even been banished from Plymouth Colony. However, by then the authorities of Massachusetts Bay wanted to drive the Pequot from their land, take control of the fur trade, and keep out their Dutch competitors. Late in 1636, the third governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, Sir Henry Vane, sent John Endicott on an expedition to Block Island to demand the surrender of Oldham's murderers. The Niantic, allies of the Pequot, welcomed them at first. Endicott wore out his welcome by demanding wampum and hostages for a murder that the tribe likely had nothing to do with. Soon wearying of peace talks, Endicott started a war, burning 2 villages, one Niantic and one Pequot, setting fire to fields and houses. A furious Governor Vane understood that his man Endicott just started a war. Throughout winter 1636, Pequot warriors fell upon tiny farm villages, slaughtered livestock, burned homes, and then vanished back into the woods like ghosts. By May 1637, Vane lost re-election to John Winthrop, who pledged to finish the war that Endicott started. As Captains John Underhill and John Mason mustered the militia, the Narragansett tribe chose to ally with the Puritans. By doing so, they hoped to break Pequot power and become rich in the fur trade. Had they allied with the Pequot, the Narragansetts could have driven the Europeans back into the sea. Instead, on April 23rd, 200 Pequot warriors responded to the prospect of war by attacking a Connecticut village. They killed 6 men, 3 women, and took away 2 girls. Seeking revenge, the Allied forces arrived at the Pequot fortress of Mistick, Connecticut, on May 26, 1637. They set fire to the palisades after breaking in the front gate with a ram and shooting whoever they found inside. Anyone who tried to escape the flames would be shot as they ran. Mason and Underhill massacred more than 700 people, mostly women and children, panicked by musket fire and blinded by smoke. Governor Winthrop celebrated news of the massacre with public prayers of thanksgiving. The Pequot proved less thankful and ambushed the English force, which fought the 10-hour Battle of the Withdrawal against more than 500 Pequot warriors. With great effort, the English survivors retreated 7 miles to their ships on the river. The Pequot lost half their fighting men in those 2 battles, which all but destroyed the Pequot nation. On June 5th, Captain Mason attacked another Pequot village, this one near present-day Stonington. Once again, he defeated and massacred the native inhabitants. Survivors from the massacres, led by the war chief Sassacus, fled towards the Dutch settlement of New Netherlands, modern-day New York. They hoped to find a warm welcome from the Iroquois Confederacy in what is today upstate New York. Instead, the Mohawk tribe, a member of the Iroquois Confederacy, greeted Sassacus by executing him and then sent his head and hands back to the English as a gift. On July 28, 1637, a third attack and massacre occurred near present-day Fairfield, and the Pequot War came to an end. The war lasted 11 months and involved thousands of men who fought several battles over an area covering thousands of square miles. Of the 3,000 Pequot who lived in the region before the war, only 200 survived. The Treaty of Hartford, signed between the English, the Narragansett, and the Mohegan on September 21, 1638, divided the spoils of war. Puritans sold most of the surviving Pequot into slavery on Bermuda Island, though a handful escaped to join other tribes in southern New England. Many others became slaves to the Mohegan and Narragansett. From that day forth, the English and allied tribes forbade the Pequot to call themselves by their name or live in their ancestral land. After the war, colonial authorities continued paying bounties for Pequot scalps. The few surviving Pequots received land at Noank in 1651, which was again taken from them in 1666. By 1800, the Pequot numbers shriveled to less than 40. At the time, the main legacy of the Pequot War lay in its opening more of southern New England to English settlement. Yet it also showed how Anglo-Americans would deal with the First Nations of North America. This process would continue until the massacre at Wounded Knee in 1890, more than 250 years later. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.